Good morning, everyone. We're so excited to welcome you to our workshop on Partnering for Progress. This workshop will teach you how to forge partnerships that align with your mission and drive success. My name is Rachel Yu, and I lead the CalTestBed program for New Energy Nexus. New Energy Nexus California, you can move on to the next slide, there you go, is part of a global nonprofit that provides funding, acceleration, training, and access to networks that drive clean energy innovation, deployment, and adoption. New Energy Nexus was founded 20 years ago in California and now serves more than 9,000 entrepreneurs in 12 countries. The California chapter administers programs such as Next Step, CalSeed, CalTestBed, and Power Forward to seed early-stage clean energy companies, test novel technologies, strengthen the clean energy workforce, and support large-scale battery manufacturing operations. Next slide, please. We all know that we can't build a clean energy future alone. Strategic partnerships are crucial to scaling innovation, accessing new markets, and creating sustainable impact. As part of the robust clean energy ecosystem in California, we are fortunate to have amazing partners across the state that are working towards the same goals we are. For instance, we partner with the University of California Office of the President and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to provide access to over 70 world-class testing facilities to entrepreneurs to test and de-risk their technologies. Next slide, please. We're proud that 38% of Next California companies have gone through at least one other California Regional Ecosystem Partner Program. 14 companies have gone on to access additional funding directly from the California Energy Commission. We have an exciting agenda for you over the next hour. Up next, I'm happy to present Kula Addy representing Momentum, who we collaborate with to host events, workshops, and other initiatives for your benefit. She will be introducing you to our agenda and moderator for today.
Thanks, Rachel. Always a joy to partner with our friends at NEX in progressing clean energy entrepreneurship. As Rachel said, my name is Kula Addy, representing Momentum. I'm a product delivery manager. And as you see on the screen here, Momentum is a clean tech consultancy. We're actually based in Sacramento. And we design, develop, and deploy funding campaigns that help accelerate clean tech solutions. Since 2005, we've deployed over 10 billion. You see that number there. And I have to say, within the last month, I think that number has gone up. We can clap for ourselves. 10 billion in funding across different projects through our core client work. And we continue moving innovation forward with our family of companies that you also see on the screen. These intersect all things climate fintech. You can learn more about our work at buildmomentum.io. We can put that in the chat when you have a chance. Check us out. Next slide. So a couple of quick reminders about our workshop today. We do encourage you to engage in the chat. Let us know where you're from. We're absolutely a global network, so we love to see what time zone you're in. And we want more of that during the workshop. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please be sure to use the Q&A box. That'll help us make sure that our panelists and our moderator can get your questions answered. Keep in mind that we are here to build community and to foster solutions. So maintaining that spirit in our hour together today will be great. We can trust that everything will be nice and respectful. We will be recording the workshop and we'll send it to you after that. So never fear, you will be able to replay all of the good tips and tricks that you'll get in this hour. Next slide. Now, I am so honored to introduce a dear colleague of mine, brilliant thought partner, and principal strategist at Momentum. She has worked across all kinds of partnerships and supports that for our clients in utilities, in the ZEV transition. Emily Nichols as our moderator today. Hello, welcome.
Thank you, Kula. And I'm more pleased to let you know who's here to share with us today. Let me introduce Carrie Davis, Partnerships Principal. She's a seasoned leader in corporate R&D, innovation, and tech commercialization. She's worked inside large corporations and then also as a founder of her own corporate innovative consulting practice and tech commercialization accelerator, specializing in realizing tech for Fortune 500 companies. Currently, Carrie focuses on scaling climate technologies at RMI's third derivative program, where she partners with investors and corporations to drive decarbonization and fund cutting-edge solutions for our sustainable future. We also have with us today Aaron Resendez, Principal Gas Engineer, bringing 21 years of utility experience to his role with Pacific Gas and Electric Company's Gas R&D and Innovation team. He leads the development and deployment of emerging technologies in gas operations, helping to shape the future of energy delivery. He's also had experience with damage prevention, emergency preparedness teams, and worked super closely with large customers across a wide range of industries. Lastly, Nikhil Garge, Senior Strategic Partnerships Manager. He leads ecosystems engagement for Activate's fellowship program, advocating for collaboration between startups and corporations to accelerate climate and hard tech commercialization. He co-created the Simplified Partnership Agreement, which you'll hear about later, a tool designed to streamline and fast-track these partnerships. Prior to Activate, Nikhil worked in corporate venturing for Siemens Next 47, focusing on AI and Internet of Things innovations for energy and industrial sectors. So those are our panelists today. Before we jump into questions for them, you're going to see a chat question about the first 3 strategic partners that you want or did reach out to onboard clean energy startups. So when you think about those first partnerships that you make, which are the ones that are most critical to you, that you think would be most useful to others? Add those in the chat so I can take a look. As you're thinking about those first 3 partnerships, what pain points are you trying to resolve when you think about them? What potential benefit are they giving you? So 3 strategic partners that you would reach out to first. All right, let's hear from our panelists. So first question on the day, what's a significant accomplishment that has happened because of a partnership? And what was that partnership? Carrie, on to you.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest case studies that we have in Third Derivative, which is we are a technology accelerator for hardware startups in the climate space. So Netflix and Disney actually came to us and said, we really want to figure out a way to decarbonize remote sets. And it was a tough challenge for them. And one of the main reasons was because they don't actually own the diesel generators that get deployed at remote filming locations. And so it really required partnership across a lot of different spaces. Not only Netflix and Disney saying we have the will and we want to figure out how to make this work, we also need the technology. So that's where RMI and Third Derivative came in, because we have the ability to source and diligence and create a thesis around like, what does this technology even need to look like and be? And then on the other end of that, kind of convening all the other players who are involved in deploying diesel gen sets and so the sound stages and the unions and the places like Sunbelt Rentals that own the actual assets that would get deployed. So I think that was a very cool example that's still happening. But the fact that we have created kind of the framework for and the kind of define these are what the startups actually would need to have as far as like power generation capabilities. We've sourced those startups, and now they're already looking at creating like sandbox environments for the startups to test their technology. And then, Netflix and Disney kind of behind it all as a cheerleader saying, yes, we are going to support whatever can help us achieve these goals. So I thought that was a pretty cool partnership kind of collaboration that happened, led by Netflix and Disney.
What about for you, Nikhil?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think I'd like to highlight a company called Fervo Energy and a partnership that they signed with Google about 3 years back, and kind of share a little bit about what that did for the company and how that moved the industry forward. So Fervo Energy, for those who are unaware, provides 24/7 carbon-free energy through enhanced geothermal. So it really explores and exploits some of the untapped potential in geothermal that we've heard a lot about, but haven't been able to really tap through unique drilling technology. And we had the pleasure of supporting the founding team of Fervo through the Activate Fellowship a number of years ago. So as a technology that needs to be deployed at scale in a very CapEx heavy format, they were really looking into the project financing side of things, need project developers to work with them to get these facilities set up. And they signed a partnership with Google in 2021, which was ostensibly the first corporate agreement supporting geothermal project development. So very unique of its kind. And I'll sort of walk through what has happened since then. So since that point, where some of that demand was sort of aligned and signaled to the market, Google provided some resources upfront to be able to get that process started, to get steel on the ground, so to speak. And what Google was really looking for was 24/7 carbon-free power that is always on for their data centers. They wanted more insight into where their power was coming from, guaranteeing that it is carbon-free and that it's always tappable, it's always available for them, because predictability for data centers is really critical. In 2023, all of these resources allowed Fervo to demonstrate the most productive geothermal well in history at this project site that was supported by Google. And in 2024, it came full circle because local utility, NV Energy, was able to buy power from this plant and deliver 115 megawatts of power to Google's data center, sort of completing that cycle. So what did that do, right? So I've described sort of Google's perspective in all of this. They're looking for power that is more predictable and able to serve this purpose. For Fervo, there was a huge amount of validation and support for this CapEx intensive project, right? Without the money and the resources upfront, and with the interest from a customer upfront, none of that will move forward. A lot of the money that comes into project development needs a lot of validation and bankability, and this provided that for this project. In addition to that, there was a high amount of alignment of market signals of demand that, like, look, there's a customer looking for this and they are willing to pay for it. And that helped kickstart the demonstration at scale, which is really critical to see these projects finally deliver on the promise that the technology comes in with.
Thank you both. Thanks to everybody for answering your first question in the chat too about who are the first 3 partners you're reaching out to. I'm seeing lots of answers about public agencies and potential funders, as well as customers, operators, technical experts, really meeting those immediate needs to be able to progress. So continue to add your thoughts in the chat. Also, just a reminder that the Q&A feature is available already, so start to add your questions there so that we can get to them later. Up next for our panel, how do you assess the top of the funnel? And then how do you keep assessing and ensure that your partnerships are effective and contributing to your growth, your objectives? What approaches do you use? Carrie, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we are an accelerator program, and so I can relate this to running a startup at the same time. But we have a framework we use for basically the milestones that we hope our startups would hit. So it's the Valley of Death framework. I'm sure everybody's probably familiar with that. But for example, if we look at Valley of Death 1, we don't provide resources in that space, but we sort of take startups coming out of that space into Valley of Death 2 and 3. So when we look at partnerships for Valley of Death 1, we look for partners who have startups that are earlier stage than our companies, who can refer startups to us, who we can exchange kind of the thoughts we're having around here are the technology verticals that we're looking at and how we're starting to think about technology in this space. So when we're reaching out to partners and then creating an engagement partnership kind of agreement with them, the KPIs can vary. That one in particular, though, is like our referrals coming through. That's a pretty kind of solid way to measure if that partnership is actually taking hold. And I think that's something that our team has gotten much better at is tracking data. So we've been around for about 5 years. So that's something that was really important there. And I think that the other thing I would just add is, since we are a relatively new organization, there's still a little bit of the, there are all possibilities. Every kind of organization that we come across, there's potential, right? And you can imagine the possibilities, but we have to really be careful and recognize that there is huge opportunity cost if we start to entertain all of those. And so it's so important to know exactly like what's the number one thing that you're trying to get out of this partnership, because you're trying to reach a certain milestone or achieve a certain goal, and make sure you're measuring that. And if you're not, if things aren't working out, then it's okay to step back and say, let's just be on the, you're in our network, we want to stay friends, but we don't necessarily need to actively manage you as a partner or engage at that level anymore.
Nikhil, Aaron, how do you view that top of the funnel partnership?
I was muted. There we go. Happy to jump in. Yeah, I agree with so much of what Carrie had mentioned. I think for me, the term that I go back to is to ensure that as you're looking at this whole range of folks that are in your funnel, one is that they align and demonstrate a certain intensity of demand. So those that are basically calling for what you are building and they wish they had it yesterday, or they wish that they would be able to buy it if they had it in hand today, those are the folks that should go immediately to the top of your funnel. And the second piece of that is also Carrie touched on milestones. That's so critical. You as a startup, as you're speaking to the market, you're setting up your arc of like what needs to get done the next 6 months. Where will you be in 2 years? Which of those partners now that you have identified will help you fill those gaps that you are not able to do yourself? Ultimately, partnership is going to be complementary to what you're doing. So the question is, what resources are those partners offering that can help you reach those goals? And then the implicit piece in that is how much can those partners realistically help you reach those? There could be folks who are really like verbally interested in what you're offering, but what are signals that every time you meet with them, you're being passed up to sort of a higher executive or someone who's able to provide the budget that you need to deliver on that project? If that change is not happening, or if you're not seeing sort of a progression in that project, that could be an unsaid signal that maybe you're not speaking to the right person, or perhaps the interest that you're seeing is not applied across the organization. The person you're speaking to maybe is super pumped about what you're working on. So just some things to consider there.
Yeah, and this is Aaron. I think, like he said, right, is you could have a lot of team members on your team excited by a potential partnership that comes through the door. But the real question we have to ask ourselves here at PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, for those that are in Boston, Mass, is how does this align with our True North strategy, which defines, how what goals do we want to achieve as an organization? But I think as we drill into that, what are the various problem statements that we're trying to kind of find solutions to? And it's, does your particular technology or idea align with those problem statements? Are they in sync? And being able to talk with the important decision makers in the organization is really key. As was said, it's great to have an evangelist, maybe on the engineering team, but at the end of the day, it's going to be an investment on both parties. And so understanding what that investment is of time, resources, et cetera, is really key right up front to make sure that that's even a viable opportunity as far as a partnership is concerned.
So we've talked a little bit about what a partnership can deliver, how to assess and apply your company's objectives to those partnerships. Let's jump into some practicality. So what practices are most effective for adapting, evolving, and making more efficient your partnership agreements? What tangible resources can we utilize when focusing on partnerships? Nikhil?
Yeah, following up with some of the points we were discussing, I think they're aligning on the goals that you have at hand with your partnering organizations is so critical. And I think that seems like it would be obvious, but I'll share a little bit where that can get lost and then kind of share a tool that could be helpful for that. So I think the term pilot is bandied around a lot. And the reality is what a pilot means for a startup and what a pilot means for an established entity, whether it's a utility, whether it's a large company, are very different things. The amount of sophistication or the amount of like polish and finish on what that pilot needs to look like, any warranties that are maybe even built into a pilot. And for some people, people are thinking like, oh, it's a pilot. Like, why would it need like warranties on certain performance and whatnot? But all of those are the questions that you really want to delve into and get a great amount of clarity on exactly what does that mean. So I would even argue that, moving the term pilot aside and getting into the details of what does the delivery that we are talking about look like to you. To help with that, one of the things that Emily had mentioned up front, we kind of saw a lot of our companies and a whole bunch of other startups in the ecosystem going and having what they termed as really interesting and valuable conversations with industry. But often a few months later, when we would check in, they'd say, oh yeah, that opportunity went by the wayside. When you drill a little bit deeper, some of it was lacking a shared language and a shared place to be able to put down all of these points of what does that project actually look like and whatnot. In other cases, it was when they did reach for a contracting tool to set up a project, it was way overblown for where they were in terms of the relationship development. So say you have a new material, class of materials, they would run into exploring a joint development agreement, which for those who are unaware, you're basically putting resources together to co-develop something. And what comes out of that is a lot of things. Could be joint IP, could be joint commercial rights for what happens to that. The reality is a lot of startups are not even at the point that they know exactly what that final product should look like. So our idea was to scale that back, create a simplified partnership agreement or a SIPA, which functions kind of like a safe note does for investment. Basically downsize all of the terms you're looking at, really help focus in on what are identifying the risks that you're looking at from the partnership angle. Can the startup provide what the corporate is looking for in a context that matters? So you can start assessing like, this is going to be an issue, that's going to be an issue, maybe this is what we need to fine tune on the technology. This is something that we work with the DOE and global law firm DLA Piper on. So it is legally blessed. And it's something that's been used many, many times to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars of projects so far. And to give you a sense of where it fits best, it's for a project that's anywhere between $5,000 to like $50,000 that takes about 3 to 9 months. And it does a couple of things. It helps you hit a number of things that I had mentioned. So it lays out expectations on the corporate and on the startup of who's providing what. It helps you identify exactly what you're going to demonstrate, who gets the rights to any results that come from that, what happens after the project, like what does it tee up. And I think in the background, it also allows you to build trust between the organizations, which is something I don't think we talk about enough. Where if you're entering a multi-year, multi-million-dollar joint development agreement as the first engagement, halfway through, you could be like, we do not work well as an organization. Our teams don't mesh really well. And figuring that out in like 3 months or 6 months allows you to get some trust in process. You can the startup can deliver on what is expected and show that that is something that they're able to do. And then at the end of it, to be honest, there's also an off-ramp. If you realize it's not a good fit, there's a very polite thanks, but no thanks that you can part ways. And there's actually learning generated already out of that. So just a tool that I'd highly recommend folks take a look at. And if you're interested, I'm happy to chat further.
Carrie and Aaron, other practical tools and approaches for making partnerships happen, adapt, and evolve.
Yeah, I'll just add this. I think like you talked about is the term that we use here in the utility. We say fail fast, right? There needs to be at the beginning of the partnership, when you're thinking about, say, a lower TRL technology, you have to have expected outcomes at certain milestones. And I think it's okay to say maybe this first milestone is a learning opportunity to assess, is the next milestone, which perhaps is more tangible, right? So you're developing a new technology. You want those lab tests to be able to assess the feasibility of actual commercialization down the road. So the next step becomes more feasible just through that learning opportunity, though you haven't gotten out as a TRL 3 or 4. Utilities like ourselves, generally we work with higher TRL level technologies. So we're kind of at the, hey, we'd like to pilot with you. We'd like to scale up if we're successful to commercialization. So our conversation might be a little bit different because of the nature of the kind of work that we do. But I think it's important to say that it's okay to fail early. In fact, that may actually benefit both parties, right? We're putting less resources into a direction that wasn't going to be fruitful for either party. But it doesn't mean that we can't both pivot and find new opportunities from those learnings such that we do have a successful outcome, because there are many problems to be solved, right? Just because you're trying to form a partnership to solve problem A doesn't mean that you don't have other tangential issues that you're also trying to solve, that those learnings can help kind of move you towards. But I did want to jump in because there's been some great Q&A here, and I really appreciate folks. So one of the ones, this is Wilson. He talks actually about data centers, right? And I will tell you that from a utility perspective, this is kind of on the top 10 list, right? For energy consuming bubbles, that because of the nature of AI, that missile has left the silo. AI is here to stay. I've got 5 kids between my wife and I. They range in age from 22 to 17. AI is a daily part of their life. They use it in college, they use it in high schools, right? So the fact that data centers are bubbling up across all spectrums is a reality that we have to face. Well, PG&E actually just announced what I thought was a creative solution to kind of the power-hungry nature of a data center. We actually came out and announced a partnership in collaboration with the city of San Jose, and the mayor was there to actually discuss why this was important for his community, is that they recognize they need more housing. The state of California has a significant housing crunch. I know we're not unique in that, but that I'm in California, so I can convey that. But what they said also is we want to be a net zero community, right? But we're also Silicon Valley, and we have an insatiable hunger for AI-based technologies, and therefore the data centers that support that. And location is everything with a data center, right? The shorter the distance for the communication to occur, the more expedient those kinds of algorithms can process and send you a result. So that said, because data centers are also energy intensive, they produce a lot of heat. So that heat can then be captured and used to support nearby housing development. And in essence, the energy that it's using can be balanced out as a net zero opportunity to support nearby housing. So you get a win-win both for the city and its need for housing, as well as in the infrastructure to be able to support the needs of that same community they're building the housing for. So I thought it was a very creative idea. And I think when we think about partnerships, oftentimes they're predicated on some sort of creative idea, right? And sometimes the partnership may involve other partners that might not necessarily be traditional partners, such as this case where a housing need is now coupled with a utility infrastructure need. And the fact of how are we going to balance this out on a grid? Now we can actually use this as an asset to be able to help with capacity issues. There's a lot more that goes into it, but that was just announced last week. So I just wanted to address that question because I think that person points out something that's very important to all of us.
Thanks, Aaron. Wilson, I've typed some of what Aaron just said into the Q&A response, and Aaron, take a look and see if I notated you well.
Sure.
I also just wanted to mention on this kind of practical practices for evolving partnerships that one of the things that works well at Momentum when we're trying to build new partnerships for ourselves is to look at opportunities outside of grant applications to respond to RFPs, RFIs, and other more information-rich, but no money on the line yet, opportunities, both with public agencies and also with potential clients. And so what we'll do sometimes is put together like an RFP response to a large port or a municipality with some of the folks that we are looking to partner with and kind of do that as a joint effort. It gives us the opportunity to figure out what strengths and what challenges complement one another, what it's like for our organizations and the individuals inside them to work together. And best case scenario, right? Not only we enjoy it, but we potentially win an opportunity to compete for furthering our businesses. Or in the situation of an RFI, we've provided information that's vital to us to an agency that might determine the future of funding in a category that's meaningful to us. So one last idea on the practical ways to adapt and evolve partnerships. All right, so I want to go back to Aaron and talk about utilities. So for folks on the call who have utilities as potentially an end consumer or critical partner, what partnerships would you recommend to these innovators that they cultivate?
Yeah, so let me just start. I put the link, I put a couple of links, an email and a link into the chat for the benefit of those on the call. Our pgne.com/innovation. I think what's really key, and I mentioned this a few moments ago, is PG&E published its R&D strategy, its second annual R&D strategy, and we highlighted it at an innovation summit back on the 13th of November, so just last week. And in there, you will find about 70 problem statements that are articulated. And what you'll also see is kind of why these are important, and you'll probably read things that resonate with you as well. So I would encourage you to do so. And what we're looking for are new ideas, right? And what we're looking for in those new ideas is how do they align with the problem statement that we've published? So if we're looking at things like renewable energy, say such as hydrogen or other types of combustible, decarbonized fuel sources, we would be looking for opportunities to work with technology companies that might have something that maybe is a little bit different than what we already see on the marketplace. We have a lot of research already going on. So what's new and novel, right, is going to be key. But I think too, one of the things you have to consider is, and it was mentioned a little bit earlier about the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy has a tremendous amount of funding opportunities for early stage research. Some of the funding opportunities are actually high risk, high reward type funding opportunities. So that is to say, your plans to do something is so groundbreaking, so disruptive that perhaps by most perspectives today, they would think, ooh, that's too risky. And certainly for a utility that's traditionally more conservative when it comes to risk, these kinds of funding opportunities can be real booms, if you may, to the development of your technology. So I would encourage you to look at various DOE sources for funding, but that's where the utility can come into play insofar as partnering together to make sure that the end technology is compatible to what the infrastructure or the needs and operations of the utility may be. Because we get a lot of folks knocking on our doors every day, as one can well imagine, with something new, but really it's already something developed. And so being able to hit the ground at the early stages together and developing that technology by getting feedback from the utility is going to be really critical to your own success.
Thanks, Aaron. My background prior to decarbonization funding consulting was in the utility space, both with public and municipally owned utilities. And so I would add to what Aaron has said with, to trust that research that you do about the utility you're trying to seek. There's not a utility that I've had the pleasure to work at or with who doesn't mean it when they say, please come to this procurement event. Please come to this innovation summit. We want to meet you. We want to get to know you. So those are not wasted opportunities, regardless of who your potential target is, whether it's an investor-owned municipal or other type of energy provider. And the other thing I would say is And we're about to talk about this some more. I think there are some non-traditional approaches that can work when you want to partner with a utility. And for me, the biggest thing that I work with my clients on is trying to solve additional problems that your potential partner is going to have outside of the problem that your technology solves for. So if that means you're coming with a really strong community partner, you're coming with a relationship with a tribal government, you're coming with, consumers who are interested in participating in a pilot. Think about the entire food chain of how to get that utility partner benefit and where you can add value with the additional partnerships you've already built. In fact, what we want to talk about next is some of these unlikely partnerships. And it's our last planned question for this panel. So add your questions in the Q&A feature. We have a few there we're going to be able to get to, but please add more so we can address as much information as possible. So let's talk a little bit about some of those unlikely partnerships that should be considered, those that seem riskier, otherwise unconventional. I'll go back to what I was just talking about. Consider community benefits. Consider DEIA Justice 40, vulnerable communities, under-resourced areas, and really consider, who can provide expertise in these categories to not only my solution and organization, but the broader goals that I have for deployment. The other thing that I would recommend in terms of risky or untraditional partnerships is to partner with your competitors. We often see that public policy needs to change in order for technology to be commercialized. And those policy changes necessitate a crowd, multiple voices who are all pushing together. The most recent example that I saw was PTL here in California. Many competing organizations kind of joined together to speak with a public agency, CARB, to say, if these things were changed in the language, we could do more development, we could produce more innovation. And it took all of those competitors kind of working together to have the agency see the value in flexibility and change. PTL is an annoying acronym for clean fuels. Thank you, Paul. So I think the two recommendations I would make in terms of untraditional and riskier partnerships would be look to your community benefit. Who is your solution going to impact for the better? And then you need to find partners who are experts and specialists and have lived experience in that community. And then the second is consider your competitors and consider those organizations and alliances that you can build. From a funding perspective, I see federal agencies and state agencies really, really preferring coalitions as their award recipients. And what that means is that single entities are less likely to be awarded funds and that groups, diverse groups, are reaping the benefits of investment in decarbonization technologies. Okay, I'm going to breathe for a second. Nikhil, tell us a little bit more about some unlikely partnerships that could be effective for innovators.
Thanks, Emily. That was really helpful. I'll follow your thread about looking up and down the value chain. So you spoke about folks in communities that are impacted by this solution and then working with competitors who are, sitting at your level effectively doing similar things. I will go up the value chain. So those who impact the projects and deliver the deliverables that you're going to be working on. And so I'll take the example of a component that's going to be installed in a solar project. To make that happen, you're not just selling to the project developer where, you're selling them on the cost savings, you're selling them on performance improvement, things like that. But who you really want to be engaging with are all of the stakeholders that are enabling that project to happen. So that could be one step back from the project developer, the permitting organization. You need to socialize with them what it is that you're building, why it works better. What are the working parts of it? How does it compare with the market rated solution currently? And you need to bring them on your side, influence them, and get them on your side to make this work. Without that, your project developer direct customer may never be fully bought in to making that change and including that in their process. The same is true of one step even further back. The banks that are actually providing the money to fund this, they get a lot of benefit from seeing a project go up for less money and having an ROI that comes back to them sooner than if they chose a different product. So how do you sell them on that? And how do you get them on your side similarly? So those may not be formalized relationships, but those I would say are equally, if not even more important, to ensure that they are aware of and champions for what you're building as well. So kind of chart out that value chain, know who is operating and will impact the installation and deployment of what you're building.
Yeah. And I'd like to add, the utility perspective, and these are all very wise recommendations, is, we're very much in collaboration with our policymakers. So for us, in every state, you've got a Public Utilities Commission that is responsible for, overall oversight of the utilities in that respective state. And so, for us with the California, Public Utilities Commission, there's a lot of partnership on reducing methane emissions, right? Either within the utility or within our customer base, right? And how can we be an enabler for that? There's proceedings on decarbonization. So if it's renewable natural gas or technologies around hydrogen, like I said, or what do we do with all this biomass, right? We have a lot of trees in the Sierra Nevada mountains that are being cut down to keep our right-of-ways clear. And so what do we do with this wood debris, right? And so forth and so on. So there's a lot of proceedings. And I think part of that stakeholder population needs to be someone who understands what's the regulatory framework for the marketplace I'm trying to get into, right? Are there inherent barriers, right? So for example, if your technology is somehow going to create electrification related realities, right? Well, we have an obligation to serve with gas lines to, those particular electrification customers. So it's like, how do you balance this out? And I think like Michaela just said, maybe actually working with your competitors, as unusual as that might sound, but to go with a common voice before proceeding and say, hey, all of us have this solution. However, the structure and policy and requirements are contrary to the success of this. We can be successful, but these are barriers to that success, right? And so it's an opportunity for you, but understanding the regulatory landscape in the marketplace, I think is a real key. Certainly for a utility, it's going to be very key.
Awesome. All right, let's jump to our audience questions. The first question we're going to answer here is about deep tech moonshots. So how can these moonshots leverage partnerships while they're de-risking technology? So what steps can be taken while you're still building your foundational model to find partners who are interested in the potential?
Yep.
Go ahead. Yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
One thing that I know for their derivative, what we've heard from a lot of our startups who tend to be seed to Series A is, hey, that's cool that you have all these kind of larger companies that are your partners. We definitely want to be our eventual customers, but in the near term, finding that mid-sized companies are actually much more interested in collaborating and ready, they can be nimble and want to solve things together. So that's something that, certainly that we're trying to build more of an ecosystem of mid-sized companies, just so that we can create that flywheel of, making introductions to them, getting our startups exposure to them. Whereas they wouldn't normally, it isn't normally kind of how we would have considered bringing those types of partners into the ecosystem, but it's something that our startups have said has become really valuable. So then you can demonstrate, real tangible results on something at a much smaller scale that then you can bring to the larger companies when the time is right.
I'll just add that I think this question is coming from someone who's building an AI accelerated discovery platform. So I'll say upfront, I think there are a number of platform-based solutions in the Activate portfolio as well. So I say this having kind of followed a number of these companies. Doing this is challenging because on one side you're building a substrate of like a solid technology, scalable technology, and on the other side, what you are really judged on is the very specific products or services that you're delivering to unique customers who are paying for that. So I would say to the second point, really focus on the needs that you're hearing from and it starts with customer discovery interviews. So where are you hearing most of where someone would like to explore this with you and to build a very, very set of specific products or get insight into where they can improve a set of materials that they have currently. But get as specific as possible is my takeaway. The resources to continue building the platform will only happen if you have money coming in the door, and being as specific as possible is going to begin to start the process of bringing money in the door.
Our next question focuses on early stage ideation and business plan development for energy efficiency solutions mass market, particularly residential electricity customers. And I'm wondering about non-traditional partnerships. So not utilities, trade allies, regulators, but other partnership solutions that would benefit that early stage for energy efficiency mass market.
I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you, but I think stepping out of some of the traditional partners, I think there have been some really unique programs that have come together over the past decade that provide the ability to generate some of the early data that you need in a more realistic scenario. So I haven't checked in with Pecan Street in a number of years, but Pecan Street is based in Texas and has had like a test street based in the state that employs and tests a number of different energy efficiency, residential, and electrification technologies. So I would encourage you to explore such programs that are putting these technologies in someone's home in a test scenario where you're going to come away with a lot of really valuable data. Another similar partner would be someone like the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. They similarly have historically worked with external partners and have put some of their researchers and their expertise to work to get you some validated third-party data that is well appreciated in the ecosystem. So if you were to bring an NREL data set to anybody, that's never going to be questioned, and it'll give you some solid data to stand on and to begin additional conversations.
Yeah, and from a utility perspective, certainly here in California, both PG&E, Southern Cal Edison, and others have their own internal organizations that are conducting a wide variety of research on products that are already out in the marketplace that might have data as well that can be provided. Oftentimes, the results of that data is, the results of that research is published in the public domain. And so there's avenues to be able to secure that data as well.
I would also look at who power providers are in deregulated markets like Texas, as Nikhil stated. And then also there's been a great deal of funding that has launched many, many hubs nationally that focus on a variety of technologies. And what I've noticed about those hubs as they've been deployed and in their first year or years of execution is that they are much more R&D focused and often provide very approachable data pilots, potential connections. And so I would certainly look at things like CalFlex Hub here on the West Coast with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and the other hubs that are specifically trying to deploy grid flexibility technologies. And pursuing some of those avenues might open up more opportunities. All right, we have time for this last question, which is perfect. any tips on partnering with entities outside of the United States? It may not be an area of expertise that we have today. I would say, just like we spoke about, being aware of and monitoring regulatory and legislative and policy activities in the area that you are based in or that you're trying to deploy. I would certainly look to entities and opportunities that mirror that internationally. I also have noticed, I mean, talk about deregulated markets too much, but that some of the organizations that are seeing success in areas like Texas are based in Europe and other parts of the global community. And so maybe that would be something else I would look at. Like as you're picking at what United States-based partnerships would be beneficial to you, to consider that many of those will have connections to more global resources. That would be kind of my one idea. Anything else the panelists want to throw out on international partnerships?
Well, we work a lot with international-based companies, particularly on the gas operations side of the house. There's a lot of great technology that has come out of the petroleum regions around the globe that are applicable to natural gas systems and can be utilized here, or with some adaptation can be utilized on our infrastructure. But, oftentimes where these ultimately come from is, someone attended a conference, a meeting, right? They ran into someone at the table when they were eating their lunch, right, together. And through that just casual networking that comes about through these activities, ultimately it was identified that, oh, there was a technology out of Germany. And I'd really like to maybe have a more thorough conversation about it. I mean, it seems kind of 101-ish, but the reality is that that's a very effective way. And so it's important that you look at the landscape, not only at the boundaries of the United States, if you're based here, but further afield, right? You're going to do a state-of-the-art research project as you look at your idea relevant to whether or not this idea is already in place somewhere else. Why not look in the EU, right? Particularly if you're looking at decarbonization, you should absolutely be looking at the EU. The war in Ukraine has really been a ripple through, the policy in Europe, and they're looking at very aggressive decarbonization goals. So there's a lot of activity being generated by that. So if you're in that space, that might be a good place to start looking as well.
I had a couple things to add. So in addition to what you mentioned, Aaron and Emily, on getting a sense of the landscape and what are some of the drivers that may actually make somewhere outside the US a good market for you, I would do two things. I would draw in any folks around you who have done business in the markets that you're looking at. So doing business and conducting business in different cultural contexts in different countries takes on very different shapes, and getting exposed to what that is, what the timelines look like, who you're selling to within those companies, all of that I think is helpful. And the last would be a plug for programs like Third Derivative, which are global and by nature have programs based outside the US. So if you're looking for a softer landing in Southeast Asia or in other markets, some of these programs could be a great way where you're provided quite a bit of support and context and access to stakeholders locally, especially if it's not somewhere that you're very familiar with, and gives you a program to kind of figure that out and get exposed to those markets.
And I'm just going to add this. Plug into your alumni network, right? If you're performing research in a business, you went to school somewhere. And the value of a good alumni network, oftentimes I'm in both of my alumni networks, and I routinely get an email, a phone call that says, hey, you went to the same school, right? Love to chat with you a little bit. This is what we're doing. And I see based on your experience, you're kind of in my field, right? Even if it's tangential. So I would encourage you, right? Especially if you went to a larger school where maybe there's some folks that might be internationally based, right? They may be a great resource for you as well. So I got to put in the plug for those alumni.
There's also a link in the chat for New Energy Nexus international programs. They have a global reach, so quite a few connections just from this panel today that we can make internationally. And that was our last question. Thanks to the panelists, and I'll turn it over to Kula to close us out.
Here we are. Thanks, Emily, and thanks to all of the panelists for your great insight today. Just a couple of things here as we close out, remembering some of the points that stood out to me that everyone contributed. Think about who should be at the top of your funnel, which partners will realistically help you fill in the gaps in the first 6 months. Go to the innovation summits. We had Next Level in October, and there will be a lot more in the new year. Read the R&D problem statements. The link is also in the chat from PG&E. The CPUC requires that utilities, IOUs submit that, so you'll find those for others. Read them. And really just try to take all of these links and use them in the time that you have. Another quick reminder, we will be putting in the chat the survey. Let us know if these resources, if this session was helpful. It's a 3-question survey that you should be able to complete in 3 minutes. Most importantly in it, you'll get to tell us what you want to hear. These workshops are for you, and we look at every single response and pull those topics from your suggestions. So let us know what will help you. You see here on the screen, and we are asking you also to save the date for January 30th. It'll be on how to secure and use alternative VC for your startup. And then, based on what you put in the survey, we'll have March's workshop based on that. So please take the survey, please save the date, and stay in touch to keep partnering for progress. Thanks, everyone. Have a great season, and we'll see you in 2025.